Good morning, scholars. Today we're going to continue our way through Far's Homeric Greek, a book for beginners, beginning with part 1 of our coverage of the third declension nouns. This will begin with 4 nouns: βασιλεύς, πόλis, ŷρωος, and ἔπos. Now, the third declension is exponentially more complex than the first and second declension even combined. Whereas there are just a couple of paradigms that you have to know for those to cover those. With the third declension, Smythe presents 13 different sets of nouns in order to cover this very complex declension. And you say, why is it so complex? Well, the reason why it is complex is because the third declension is made up of nouns that end in a consonant. So 240 of Smythe. The third declension includes stems ending in a consonant. And so you imagine all the various consonants, and very many of them can end stems. And so we have to deal with how the attachment of the endings to the stem affects the stem. So this declension includes stems ending in a consonant, as well as stems in iota and upsilon, or in a diphthong. That means epsilon, upsilon, etc. And some in omicron and omega, representing omega digamma and omicron iota, respectively. So to determine, reading the note, to determine whether a noun belongs to the third declension, it is necessary in most cases to know the stem, which is usually found by dropping the os, omega sigma, of the genitive singular. In stems in iota and upsilon, these two are classed under the consonant declension because neither of these vowels admits contraction with the case endings beginning with a vowel, herein being like a consonant. So again, there are a lot of different endings to these third declension nouns, unlike the first declension nouns, which ended in alpha, which sometimes became eta, or the second declension nouns, which ended in omicron. These have many different endings because of the various consonants and iota, upsilon, omega, digamma, and omicron iota. So you really need to strap on your big boy pants if you're going to master the third declension. And in all honesty, I can't imagine anyone who masters the third declension before their second or third year of Greek, actually. It's something you'll always be referring to, and that's another reason why it's just so good to have a copy of Smythe Greek Grammar, where you have all the fine points, and it's all gathered together very elegantly. Okay, so let's begin. Everybody take a deep breath. Okay, so our 4 again: βασιλεύς, ŷρωος, πόλis, and ἔπos. Okay, and these are found in Smythe's. I have the sections where they're found, respectively. And so βασιλεύς, king, is found at Smythe 275, ŷρωος at Smythe 267, πόλis, city-state, at Smythe 268, and épos at Smythe 264. Now, you will do yourself a huge favor. I cannot overstate this. If you copy out this paradigm, this chart of the endings of the third declension 100 times. And when I say copy it out 100 times, I mean, copy it out the first few times looking at the chart, but then try to reproduce it looking only at the mind in your eye, okay, with the eye of your mind, because you really need to just have this printed on your brain, because in all honesty, even though analytically the third declension is quite complex, if you are really sure about the endings and you know the stem or the word, you can tell one from another pretty easily. But it's absolutely essential that this chart be etched in your brain like, some monument on a stone commemorating some great heroes. Because you will be a great hero once you've mastered the third declension. Okay, so here we go. In the nominative singular, you have sigma or blank, or there's nothing. In the genitive, you have omicron sigma. In the dative singular, you have simple iota. And in the accusative, you have either alpha or nu. In the plural, in the nominative, you have epsilon sigma. In the genitive plural, you have the good old omega nu. In the dative, you have sigma iota, and sometimes the sigma can double up. And in the accusative plural, you have long alpha sigma or epsilon sigma. These are your endings. So, if we look at βασιλεύς, you'll see that, just declining the singular, βασιλεύς, βασιλεώς, βασιλεύ, βασιλεύ-ς, βασιλεύ, o βασιλεύ. That's our vocative. And then in the plural, you have βασιλεύς, βασιλεόν, βασιλεύ-ς, βασιλεύ-ς. And again, if you compare the chart with the actual endings attached to βασιλεύς, you will see that they are easily recognizable in their case and number, if only you are very secure with those endings. Okay? Very good. Now, the vocative singular of βασιλεύς gives us a chance to look at one of the general rules for the formation of third declension nouns. It's my 248. The vocative of masculines and feminines is usually the pure stem. So that is to say, the stem without anything added to it at all. So if I say O city, that's O palais. If I say O cow, it's O boo. If I say O Socrates, if I say O Socrates, it's Socrates. Socrates, O Socrates, as opposed to Socrates, lege, tein, aletheon. Okay? Socrates, nominative, lege, says, tein, aletheon, the truth. So the difference between Socrates and Socrates is marked by that vocative having the epsilon sigma and thus throwing the accent all the way back. O Socrates. It's kind of cool. Stems in iota delta and nu tau cannot retain the final delta and tau. See section 133. Hence, Artemi is from Artemis, and pi, o slave, o boy, o girl, o pi is from Pais. Likewise, neane is from neanis, maid, o neane, and gerhon, old man, is from geron. And gigon, gigon, is from gigas, giant, just like our giant. Gigas, gargantuan. Okay, so these are the vocative, the special of the way these vocatives are formed, and the vocatives are always wonderful. Okay, now it gets a little complicated here, but this is actually one of my favorite little discoveries, this phenomenon called transfer of quantity. Because in the Homeric poem, as we'll see when we look at the meter, da 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 da, because it's a succession of long and short syllables, sometimes Homer might get to a place in the line where he needs a short and a long, and then another place he might need a long and a short. And this transfer of quantity gives him the opportunity to kind of like roll with necessity in making up, in matching his meter. So what is this transfer of quantity? Here we go. Eta omicron and eta short alpha often exchange quantities to become epsilon omega or epsilon long alpha. So do you see what's going on here? We have a long eta omicron short, a long eta omicron alpha short, and both of these, if we need to switch it up, become epsilon omega or epsilon long alpha. So it's just a switching of the quantity. What was long and short becomes short and long. Thus, neos in epic, naos, folk, becomes neos, and πόλεως becomes πόλεως, of a city, and tethneotos become tethneotos, dead. Basileia becomes basileia, king. So this phenomenon of transfer of quantity, like I said, it's one of my favorites. It really is wonderful, because when you're just learning the forms, if you have a book that's just giving you the alternative forms that we'll look at next, just giving them to you without explaining this thing, transfer of quantity, it just seems kind of random and crazy. But this explains what's going on. And so the phenomenon of shortening, Smythe 39, explains a little more. A long vowel may be shortened before another long vowel. So basileon from basileon, of kings, neon from neon, of ships, tethneos from tethneos, dead. Very good. So what this boils down to is what you see in this chart, the various ways that βασιλεύς can switch quantities. So βασιλεύς, the nominative stays stable, but the genitive can be βασιλεός or βασιλεός, and etc., etc. Okay, I'll let you look at this section on Smythe to get it down and copy it out many times and say it to yourself. Very good. So βασιλεύς is a very important declension. This is a very important declension because, among other things, a great many proper names are declined in this manner. So Achilleus, Achilleos, Atreus, Atreos, Tydeus, Tydeos, that is to say, Achilles, Atreus, and Tydeus, the father of Diomedes, respectively. So these endings in epsilon, upsilon, sigma, it's a very important declension. Okay, so next we have πόλις, πόλεως. And of course, the Greeks are celebrated for the discovery or the invention of the polis, which most often gets translated city-state, but if you're going to be philosophically precise, it should be translated as a political community. Because if you think about Athens, when it was attacked by the Spartans, I mean, you have people who live in the city, but most of the people are farmers, and they live out in the townships around the city, or the countryside communities around the city. And then when the Spartans attacked, they all withdrew into the city behind the walls, and so it became crowded. You got the plague and everything. So the polis is not so much like we think of a city. We think of the city limits. If they had a wall, we think what was behind the wall. But polis is a bigger notion of the political community that, say, would take refuge behind walls if it were attacked. So, again, in polis, we have the transfer of quantity that should be noticed in the genitive and dative singular. So, polis, polεως, polεos, polē, polεε, polεε, pollen. And plural, polēs, polεον, polεse, polēs. And again, if you compare the full declension with just the schema of the endings, it would not be hard to guess which was which. And so when you recite these, I suggest that you not worry about the transfer of quantity variations. You should just go polis, polεως, polē, pollen, polēs, polεον, polεse, polēs. Do it like that, and then in your mind, conceptually, you are nevertheless aware of this phenomenon of transfer of quantity. So when you see it on the page, it does not throw you. And it really won't. It's just kind of wonderful. Okay. So next we have ŷρως, ŷρωος, ŷρωος. And this one, reading 267, stems in omega digamma have lost the wa, the digamma, and appear as omega stems. This omega contracts with the case endings in the dative and accusative singular and in the nominative and accusative plural. Stems in omega digamma are masculine. So you have ŷρως, ŷρωος, ŷρωε, ύρωα, and then o ύros. And then the plural, ύρωες, ύρωον, ύρωσε, ύρωας. Other words that are in this model, formed after this model, are tros, the word for a Trojan, patros, the word for a father's brother, your uncle, metros, your mother's brother, and dmos, slave. So this, there aren't a lot of words of this declension, but of course we need to learn it for the opening of the Iliad because ŷρωον occurs in that first love stretch. Okay. Next, we have these ἔπος, which is a member of what are known as stems in sigma, because ἔπος, the actual stem, was ȳέπεσ with the digamma in front of the first epsilon and sigma epsilon the second. So ἔπος to ἔπος is from YPS. So the actual stem is a sigma, ends with a sigma, epsilon sigma, that has disappeared. And so in Smythe, his example word for this is actually genos, to genos, race or kind, and he has other nouns that are grouped with this one, like it says, stems in epsilon sigma, alpha sigma, and omicron sigma, but we're just looking at this first example of epsilon sigma when we look at épos and genos. So, reading 263. Stems in sigma are contracted, where sigma falls out between the vowel of the stem and the vowel of the ending. See section 120 of Smythe. Thus, genos, race, genitive, geneshos, and when it's contracted, as we'll see, genus, dative, genès, and when it's contracted, gene. And you can compare Latin genus, generis. Now, neuters with stems in epsilon sigma and omicron sigma have the nominative, accusative, and, neuters with stems in epsilon sigma have omicron sigma in the nominative, accusative, and vocative singular. So this is going to make this kind of easy in the sense that in the singular, it's os, omicron sigma, omicron sigma, omicron sigma. And then you're only worried about the genitive and the dative in the singular. And then the neuters with stems in alpha sigma have alpha sigma in these cases. And we'll worry about those later. But here we go. So, if we look at the declension of épos, we see, as was said, that the nominative and accusative singular are épos, but in the genitive and dative singular, you have very clearly the endings, épos, épei, which can contract to épous, épei. And likewise in the plural, if you're remembering your simplified schema of the plural endings, a, on, se, a, you have épea, épeon, épesse, épea. And these two can contract épé, épon, épesse, épei. Now such forms are called opened or closed, depending on whether or not contraction has occurred between the vowels. Épéos is open, épous is closed. Homer uses open or closed forms according to convenience. But one really good thing about Homer and Herodotus are that they tend to favor the open forms. And you can get away with reading Homer and Herodotus more or less without having any mastery of the rather complex rules of contraction that reign in Attic. So that's another place where Homeric and Herodotean Ionic Greek are actually more, they just show you what you're really working with, because you don't have to deal with these contracted forms. I mean, who would be looking at the genitive singular épous, omicron, upsilon, sigma, and be able to recognize that that was from epsilon, omicron, sigma. So you see, in the contracted form that you'd see in Attic, the ending itself of omicron, sigma has been completely obscured. So there's a clarity in Homer and Herodotus that one loses in Attic. Or put the other way, there's a complexity in Attic that you don't have to deal with in Homer and Herodotus. Okay. So that's it, guys. We're off to the races with the third declension, and we're very close to our goal. Meinen aedetea peleiado akileos. Ulomenen he muriakaios alge eteke. Polas diftimus sukas aidi proiapsen heroon, autus de eloria diuke kunesen, oinos et te pase, Dios de te le et obule, ex hu de ta prota, diastetein erisante, atre ides te anaxandron, kai Dios agilevs. Just around the corner, folks, so keep working hard on your Greek. Have a great day. We're rocking and rolling. Bye-bye.